Okay, so service portfolio. I thought we need to take a bit of a step back because the title of this is the new framework for developing the eLTER RI service portfolio, and a lot of people might think, what was the old one and what's changed? So I'm going to start at the very beginning of this and work through to what we intend to do in the Thursday afternoon sessions on service portfolio. So tomorrow there will be a full working session on this. So to go back to one of the early pictures of how we might deliver services, hopefully people remember this and remember things like the eLTER service portfolio and the idea that we would have a number of thematic service areas that we would deliver to our stakeholders. And what we wanted to do was to start to look at the thematic services that we could offer from things like topic centers. And this extended through to not only the sort of IT data services, but also, as you can see from these bullets, a whole range of other services, which could be offered through topic centers or the head office, or the particular national platforms, the full range of site services that might be offered through to these through the service portfolio to the users. And this could include things like education, training, as well as IT and data services that I mentioned. And delivering central services is a key part of the timeline. So we've talked about this idea of the valley of death somewhere around the implementation of construction. We need working services to be there when the RI goes into operation, and the central service is key to that. So we need to have a solid process for how they get costed, how they get tested, and how they get commissioned by the RI. We have a set of stakeholders in what's called here a stakeholder taxonomy. And part of the issue is that there are obviously quite a lot of groups here. So out on the edges of this diagram here, you can see all the different groups that we're trying to map these services to. And people will remember that through the the Mercury meeting, and through the Venus meeting, we did a lot of work in crosstabs through Mural and various other things to start to map all these different services, all these different functions that could be provided through to this wide range of stakeholders. And things got more and more complicated. So we got more and more crosstabs because trying to map a wide range of services and a wide range of potential delivery points to a wide range of stakeholders gets complicated quite quickly. We mapped this out in some sort of workflow that we could look at how we would do that. And this was the people in the Venus session. They'll remember that this was the way that we saw it working. So we would have a number of service functions that would map directly into the service portfolio that related to the stakeholder categories that I've just shown you. And we would look at the impact and the value of that. And this is what would go into the commissioning process to say which ones are the ones that we want to process. So this was where we were in terms of how we thought the analysis of the services would work in the Venus meeting. And we had a number of steps in this. So we had service screening. This is where we were really in the Venus meeting for clustering and rankings of these different services. And then we wanted to move into the tools and the processes. And part of what we had to do was to make sure that this was presented to the interim council so that the interim council was aware of the types of services that would define the RI, and they could approve that because at the end of the day, someone has to pay for the delivery of these services, and that is very much part of what the interim council has to make decisions about. However, the complexity of this situation required a good analysis of the different elements of what we were trying to do, and that's what I've done since the Venus meeting. And this diagram has actually been shown to various groups within the RI and externally to things like the interim council, to try and divide out this issue of how value of the services is mapped to the requirements of the stakeholders versus how they can be delivered from RI service providers. And the complication is that we want a flexible approach because we want to be able to take advantage of services that come from outside the RI. And the obvious example of this is either sister RIs, so the likes of LifeWatch, ICOS, Actress, these other environmental RIs that are providing services that we can well take advantage of to provide value to our users. And we need a service portfolio structure that is capable of bringing those kinds of components in. We also need to look at EOS, the European Open Science Cloud, and the types of services that they are constructing and how we can take those on board as well. So this schema will be central to the analysis as we move forward. And as I said, it's already been used in consultation with a number of key stakeholders for eLTER. I will revisit this on a number of occasions, and we will revisit it on Thursday, don't worry. Just to say that Jerome, who will be presenting tomorrow, has been working away on some of the deliverables from PPP Work Package 5 and has refined the workflow for producing the service portfolio. So now we have the idea that we have these elementary services, a scouting phase, which we're still very much in. They help us define what we call these service bundles, which I'll go through in a minute, how they are delivered through things like service components, delivery hubs, and how that eventually turns into the service portfolio and how the feedback works so that we can actually evaluate these with particular stakeholder groups. Jerome has also done a job on looking at some of the key functions by stakeholder groups. These are the higher level service stakeholder categories. But when we work tomorrow, we will be working at the stakeholder group level. So we will be working right down at the lower level of mapping these values that we get from our RI services to actual stakeholder groups. So back to explanation of this schema. So why did we do this? The reason is because in many of the analyses that we were doing, we were coming across this problem of defining a workflow that the user actually required. And I'll go through one of those in a minute. But the workflow might be something like find a range of sites, find the data that's available from those sites, select particular data sets and download those. So that would be a workflow for a user typically. And that is not necessarily delivered by one service provider. There's cataloging, there's where the data is held, there's contact with the sites. There's a various range of things that might need to be brought together. So we created this concept of a service bundle, and the service bundle is a range of different components that enable that workflow to be delivered. So what we're going to be doing tomorrow is concentrating on those service bundles. What are the key workflows that users require, and how might we bundle those together within this thing called a service bundle? We have a number of proposed service bundles that we will be giving to you, which are the things that we think are necessary, such as data access, site access, some key central office services, but it may be that there are other things that you will want to define for particular stakeholder groups. The components that deliver those services will come through from these service delivery hubs, and we've yet to map those through. We know that there are some existing services, such as things like DIMES, that have existing places where they're delivered from. But this is going to be a subsequent part of the analysis. So this is after what we're doing tomorrow. We are very much focusing tomorrow on this top end of how the workflows for service bundles deliver value to our stakeholder groups. So that's what we want to do. So what do these service bundles look like? We are producing some information on the wiki. We still have to update that with some of these concepts, but basically the service bundle could be something like how we access site information clusters. So this is the idea that there is a range of data available at a site, which is not just the observed data at that site, but is a range of contextual data, such as some of the things that are coming from WP4 in the plus, so things like EO data or socioeconomic data, and they will be bundled up so that they can be accessed as part of an information cluster. And there could be different flavors of that. The workflows that are required by different users to access that information may be subtly different. An obvious example of this might be a simple bundle might be just look at what data is available and download it. So this is what I've called a bronze level bundle. But a gold level bundle could be that you can go in and using the cookie cutters that we've developed to actually cut out your own data, bring your own data into the information cluster, cut that out and actually create your own data sets for that. So there could be a number of flavors of a particular bundle. And that's one of the things we will look at by defining the workflows. The workflows are specific to the stakeholders and their particular needs, but there may be several workflows within a particular service bundle. And then we're going to have a template that specifies the key features of each bundle, which will be things like the function, the value, and the workflow. And I'll show you the template for that just in a minute. The delivery hubs, so this is where the services are actually delivered from. With the IT components, these are, it's fairly clear to see how this would work. But there will be other things that we want to do, such as training and support. The RI will be looking at things like whole system research, design, support services. These are quite complicated service bundles that we need to work through. So the way we think it will work is that some of the initial bundles, such as access to information clusters or site data, will be relatively straightforward to specify and to say how they will be delivered initially and what the costs are for that. And we hope to do that for the interim council in January. Other ones will take longer to develop, and we will have those as work in progress within the portfolio. And it should be understood that the service portfolio is always a work in progress. We are always responding to stakeholders' requirements. We are always looking at the landscape of what other RIs and things like EOS Hub are delivering as services that we can make value from. So bundles can be put into the service portfolio that are a work in progress. So in our session tomorrow, we can include some of those things. So complicated workflows such as how we support whole systems research, how we do place-based research, project design. Those things can be included, but will be a work in progress within the system. So typically, what would they look like? Well, the IT service is pretty straightforward. There are things like DIMES, there are things like the data integration portal, there are things like data labs, which are already in existence, but these are IT service components. The point is that to identify a site, to evaluate the data that's available, to actually visualize that and maybe do some analysis in terms of the cookie cutting that I described previously, that is the workflow, and it combines a number of different components. So that's what I mean by a workflow. It's the step through a number of different components to actually deliver you the value. And that's what we're going to be doing in the template. Just to mention EOS Hub again, one of the things we do want to do with our components is to make them available where appropriate through the EOS Marketplace. And to do that, we need to follow a particular procedure. So the templates that I have and we will be developing have that process in mind, because when we want to make things available through the EOS Marketplace, we have to follow a very particular procedure, which most people don't have to worry about, but I have to worry about. So that's why some of the templates will be the way they are. It's because we need to collect particular information for making things available through EOS Marketplace, if that's what